Hey, 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 this is Tasemere, your host for the show, The Blackout, live from New York. Just in case I have some new viewers today, the purpose of this segment is to celebrate Black culture across the diaspora and to have an open dialogue about Black economics, how we reimagine trends in business and explore the magic we have. In today's segment, we will explore, I'm sure you guys know about this, Cornel West and his resignation letter to Harvard University. Black entertainers are investing in solar energy and FEMA's denial to generations of Black families in the Deep South. So let's jump right into Cornel West. If people aren't familiar with him, he's a very distinguished professor of African American studies. He was at Harvard University, and he has now written an open letter of his resignation because he is accusing Harvard of stealing intellectual property and basically having no regard for Black folks. I want to bring up, as you guys know, I am someone who likes to share where my sources are coming from. And so I am going to actually share my screen with you so you can also see the article that I am referring to. So this is my entire screen here. So I hope you guys can see the article that I am referring to. Cornel West has announced he's leaving Harvard and says the school has lost its way. In this article, he is basically saying that the school has stolen both intellectual and spiritual bankruptcy of deep depths. So he is basically saying that the school has actually stolen some IP. And so I went and spoke to some folks that have worked for universities, and what has been the case is that when you create something and you are a professor, so let's back up for a moment here to unpack this. Basically, when you are a professor at a university, you have to still do ongoing research, right? And so the research that you are doing is oftentimes associated with the work that you're studying or the department that you're studying, and you're writing proposals and you're doing all this stuff. Now, whatever you come up with, even though it is your own thoughts and your own research, is then owned by the university. So all your IP rights are basically gone. This is all owned by the university. And so that is one thing that is happening just when you're a tenured or even a non-tenured professor. And so he's basically saying that that they basically have stolen his spiritual currency and also his IP. So I went ahead and I also located the letter that he wrote, or that is said to have been written by him to the university. So let's also unpack that as well. Let me pull it up here. I want you guys to see my whole screen. If at any point you can't, please let me know. I hope that you can see this. So this letter was written June 30th, and it says, I hope and pray you and your family are well. This summer is a scorcher. Here is my brief and candid letter of resignation. He goes in to say that the curriculum is scattered, that basically the faculty is all over the place. The student population is disorientated. It's just all over the place, right? And then he also goes on to say that his salary has been less right here 4 years ago, with a salary less than what I received 15 years earlier, and with no tenure status after being a university professor at Harvard and Princeton. So we know that those are really two big Ivy League schools. But he was still wanting to take on the challenge of teaching there and the shadows of Jim Crow, which is important to, highlight because we all should be familiar with Jim Crow were laws that went on the books and some, laws that may not have been written, unspoken, but you definitely knew that they were there post freeing enslaved Black folks in this country. So we all should be familiar with that. If you're not, I definitely suggest that you become familiar. He later goes on to this letter towards the end, talking about the death of his mother, and how the university was not supportive to what he was going through. And in a combination of all of this, he basically has decided to resign from Harvard. Want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please share. I have my own thoughts, so let's jump into this. One, I feel like, we all know that these rules are constantly changing and that Black folks are basically always up for grabs of stealing our intellectual property, our culture, anything that belongs to us and is innate to us, that other institutions that weren't really designed for us to take a part of it are always looking to capture as much as they can and give back as little as they can. So that's one of my thoughts. My other thoughts is around the whole notion of, you're putting your heart and your soul into a career, into a job that is relying on other people to see you and to hear you and to respect you. And the moment that that doesn't happen, you're hit with reality that, they really don't love you as much as you thought that they did. And so I really want to unpack how this impacts our economics as a diaspora of Black folks, because we are basically giving this institution value. So in Cornel West's instance, he's a very distinguished professor. So I'm sure that the university saw some value in having him, be a professor at their institution, because I'm sure he could have gone to a lot of different institutions and, they would have been able to market it in a kind of way to draw students in, right? And to have students pay these high tuitions. We know that tuition in America is like costing in enormous, I don't even know if that's the word to describe it, but going to school here in America costs a lot of money, right? And so the schools are definitely using that money for facilities and paying professors, but we also know that it's just a lot of money to go to college here. So I'm sure that that was a draw. But on the flip side, he's really not seeing any of that money. So what is that money actually going towards? He is basically an engine of economics for the school, but not vice versa. And then when we talk about IP, that is short for intellectual property. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. If you come up with a thought, slogan, a logo, anything that is original to you, that is your own intellectual property, right? You want to make sure that that is protected. But working at a university, you kind of waive that protection of your own thoughts, and you are doing it on behalf of the university. And we can even break that down to a regular 9 to 5, right? So if you are working on a regular job, whether it's a for-profit or nonprofit, entity, and you come up with something, you do not own what you have come up with. The entity that you work for owns that thing that you have done. So you lose the right to then come back and say, hey, I designed this really cool program, I designed this really cool product, and I want to partake in some of the longevity. If you ever make any money from this, I also want to own some of it. So I can share some personal experiences at my previous job. I'm not sure if these are my same viewers as usual. I am now an entrepreneur, but I haven't always been an entrepreneur. So when I was working full-time at an organization, I helped do a trademark application for a word that I co-created with the president of the organization, right? So this was like our combined thoughts. So you would think we would both share in this intellectual property. But wait, hold on. No, that's not the case, right? Because I created this for the pleasure or at the pleasure of my job that I had at the time, I am not entitled to recoup any of those benefits unless I had a contract in place with that entity that said that I own some rights to it and that my name was also included as one of the authors on the actual trademark application. And because that was not the case, and it was just the organization's name is on there, the organization owns it. My boss at the time, she also doesn't own any of this stuff, right? Because we're working at the pleasure of the organization, and they did not authorize our names to be authors on this application, right? So if this word becomes part of the dictionary, if this word makes any kind of money at all, I don't have any ownership to it, right? So just unpacking that, I have lost out on potential projected revenue just because of that. And so this is what is also the case of Cornel being at this university. He has now lost potential revenue, right? There's no way for him to recoup this. But also he's almost getting burned multiple times because he has brought revenue into the school. They're not paying him the salary that he was making 15 years ago. We all know that the cost of everything has gone up from 15 years ago. Mortgage rates, rental rates, cost of food, cost of gas, cost of breathing has just gone up so much from 15 years ago. So he's also taking a shot of that. And then imagine your employer is now saying, I do not care about you. So you have had this tragic death happen to your parent, right? And they're saying, okay, totally get that. Maybe don't even get that, but I still want you to show up to work, right? And I still want to be able to make money off of you. I mean, that would be, a breaking point for anyone to decide, whether you are a professor at a prestigious university or you are someone working a regular 9 to 5, maybe not making that much money, maybe not even having, a college degree. It doesn't really matter. What matters is the humility, I guess you would say, the empathy around just being discarded, and how many of us have actually felt that way, that we have poured into something that we do not own, that we are now not really reaping the benefits that we thought we would reap, even benefits that don't cost any money, right? So I can only imagine how he was livid, because I have too been livid. And when I was in situations not exactly like this, but could be similar to this, where I felt like, hey, I have poured my thoughts, my energy, I have sacrificed money, I've sacrificed certain things that I hold near and dear to me for this job, and now you're basically telling me like, whatever, that was all on you. And by the way, we took your thoughts. Like, that sucks. So now I want to hear from you guys. I have one viewer right now. So if you can drop something in the notes, let me know how you feel as I segment or segue into my next topic, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, but 2 rappers have decided to invest in solar energy instead of investing in, jewelry and materialistic things. Not sure if you are aware. Let me scroll up. 2 Chainz and Juicy J invest in $2 billion solar energy merger. Someone said, I think this is Juicy J, says, I was going to buy a diamond watch, but decided to invest the money into a huge operation. This is changing the game for me, because I know I have been someone who has criticized entertainers and socialites of like wasting money, right? Like, oh my gosh, you made all this money and you just like wasted it on something that wasn't even remotely important. And imagine what you could have done if you would have reinvested that into something that actually mattered. So one, I was like kind of proud that they actually decided to invest in solar energy, and it is a 2 billion merger. So that is like some serious cash. But when I read down into the article, and let me scroll and show this to you again, I learned that someone else is a part of this that we definitely know if we have been following voting rights. But our homegirl here, Stacey Abrams, is serving as an advisor to the CEO, who is a renowned angel investor, entrepreneur, and fund manager, Bill Gross. So that is major. Black folks are entering the game at a really pivotal time, really interested in knowing how they even came to know of this opportunity and why they want to reinvest in solar energy. So also solar energy, which I know most of us are aware, but again, just to give us some very basic and broad information about solar energy, is basically absorbing the sun's energy into these like solar panels that are created, and that you're supposed to be able to use this energy to power certain things that you want to be able to do. And if you harness enough energy, you can also power that's more I guess, items or entities that can be powered. And it is supposed to be a lot more eco-friendly and a lot more sustainable, right? Now, I have attempted to go solar in my own capacity, and I have ran into some challenges in my layman attempt to go solar. So I have bought these book bags that are supposed to, absorb some energy. But I live in New York City, so I live in a place that isn't always sunny, right? And I can't always charge it up. I also tried this at one of my employees and bought these like LED lights that were supposed to be solar generated, and I thought if I just stuck them in the window that would be enough sunlight, and it totally wasn't. It didn't power up anything for any amount of time. So I have found my own challenges. However, I know that there are institutions like NYSERDA that are building out solar roofs in order to absorb energy. And actually, if you do that on a building that you own or on a home that you own, you can get some tax breaks from like Con Edison or National Grid or wherever you get your energy. Those are the two big companies that I know of. And so I'm really interested to know, how did they learn about this merger? What are they planning to do? What is their projected income, and how are they going to, reinvest that? That was really awesome. I wonder if this is also going to change other entertainers' views around getting into more strategic deals and developments of what it is that they would like to do. This is really intriguing to me. I'm super interested about it. Want to know, how can I become a part of it? One of the things that I have been hearing a lot about, and I know that there's another host on this platform that I think just did a segment on this, but is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And so sometimes I'm kind of like torn. Like, once we are allowed into an industry, does that mean that it has as much value as it has when we're not partaking in it? Just wanting to understand how that works. But I know that a lot of folks are into cryptocurrency, into Bitcoin, totally don't understand the whole blockchain effect and buying into Bitcoin. So I haven't really tested that out. yet, and I see solar energy as something just as big, if not bigger than Bitcoin. Super wondering how this will impact the development of neighborhoods, of cities. How is this like the new selling of water? I have no clue. I mean, I have spoken to some older folks that told me that, at one point no one was drinking this bottled water, right? People were just going to the well and just getting their water, and someone came up with a nifty idea to put it in the bottles and sell it, right? So wondering what, like, is this the new thing with solar energy? Is similar to like repackaging things that we've always have had access to for free, right? We've always had access to the sun. Are they going to start charging us for harnessing the sun's energy to move things? I'm just thinking out loud. I have no answers to any of these things, just thinking out loud here. And it reminds me of this. I know that some people are really upset with Dr. Seuss, but I'm going to bring it up. Reminds me of Dr. Seuss's book, The Lorax, where, if you guys are not familiar about it, it's basically about a guy who decides to cut down all these trees to use the tip of the tree to design these clothes and all these other things, right? Basically, the moral of the story is that there was a whole lot of forest animals that lived where he decided to cut the trees down. Because he cut the trees down, they all decided to move away, and the trees just never grew back, right? So it became very dark, very gloomy, where it was someone had the idea to sell air. So it was like one part of the town where he was at, had no life there and was very dark, and you really couldn't breathe out there. And then they designed another city not too far and decided that they were going to package this air. This young boy comes up with this nifty idea to go visit this person that, cut down all these trees because he wanted to get this tree for a girl that he liked. He gets the seed, he plants the seed, and then boom, the seed starts growing, and people are like, oh my gosh, I don't have to pay for this air. This is so crazy. Wondering if we're moving in those kinds of directions around economics, but also super proud of these two folks for deciding to even get in the game anyway, because you never know where your opportunities may or may not lie. And I'm really interested in knowing what is next for them, and will other entertainers start considering reusable energy as being part of their investment portfolio. I totally know that they are already thinking about, again, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin as being part of their investment portfolio, but wondering just how innovative are people going to be around how they are going to use their money in order to make money. And then also interested in knowing how 2 Chainz and Juicy J are going to reinvest in their Black communities that they come from. So would love to know if they're going to make solar more affordable for, Black folks. Are we going to be more educated around solar energy? Is this projected to make or create a certain amount of jobs that will go to Black folks? Because it's one thing to have a seat at the table, and it's another thing to be able to have a voice, and then it's a really other thing to be able to really advocate and from your advocacy impact larger change, right? So totally want to understand what that is about and how that shakes out. Now, want to move into another topic. I had 3 topics that I wanted to make sure that I got in today. Another topic that is discussing FEMA and FEMA denying generations of Black folks access to their pool of money. So I am going to again share my screen because I want us all to be on the same page. This is an article that I read scrolling up to the top, tippity top. So the real damage, why FEMA is denying disaster aid to Black families that have lived for generations in the Deep South. So we should be familiar now. In the Deep South, they have a lot of tornadoes, hurricanes, windstorms sometimes. But here we are talking about tornadoes ripping through rural Alabama. And we know that that is as deep, 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 deep south as we are probably going to get. And someone wanted to understand why not enough people were signing up for help. So like they're having these tornadoes run through, probably destroying their property. And we also touched on redlining last week. That is like a national, crisis that has happened, and how redlining affects different portions of our lives, right? And so now we're looking at redlining as it relates to insurance, which is what we usually have looked at it as, but also now people are not even asking for help when they are hit with a natural disaster. So this guy named Chris Baker wanted to figure out what was going on. And so he basically went on a journey to figuring out what is happening. So you see here, he says, this person doesn't even want to call on FEMA, right? FEMA goes by, people aren't even calling on FEMA to come out and help them. And I have had very little personal relationship with FEMA because I live, well, that's not true. I live in New York City. We did have Hurricane Sandy happen years ago. However, I was not personally impacted, but I did see for the first time, how devastating a natural disaster can be on different communities, and how some people, because they live closer to the water, really suffered from a lot of flooding. But I haven't personally had to fill out anything for FEMA. I know some folks that live out in Louisiana who are always dealing with water and water issues over in Louisiana and Texas, and how much they have to pay for flood insurance, if they're even able to get flood insurance to protect them. But I had never heard about what was happening with Black folks. And so I want to just pull this up again because I have found a piece of the article that I think we should definitely investigate a little bit. So the piece of this article is here. Nationally, FEMA denies requests for help from about 2% of applicants for disaster aid because of title issues. In majority Black counties, the rate is twice as high. So this is, just wondering why this is the case. Is this something that is like secretly written into policies? And this goes, maybe I need to go investigate insurance a little bit. But what is going on with the insurance underwriting? If you go even further, and FEMA has rejected up to a quarter of applicants because they cannot document ownership. So that's interesting. Is this the actual deed or title to the house that doesn't necessarily have their name on it, but their parents have lived there, and this house was, passed down from generation to generation, but maybe the title hasn't been changed? And this is where we get into really intricate parts of understanding the operational aspect of what we are living in, because I actually have talked to a real estate attorney who did let me know that when you are owning a home, owning a condo, owning a co-op, those are the only 3 forms of housing that I know you can own. If there's something else, please feel free to let me know. But when you're owning that, you should definitely hire a real estate attorney to make sure that the deeds are written or changed in a way that makes sense, that ensures that the person that you want to own the home actually is the owner, not just by feeling or by maybe someone told them like, hey, if I pass away, I want you to like take over the house, but in legal documentation, because it seems like this is what FEMA might be relying on. And because we haven't necessarily had all of that information, we just didn't know. Plus, how much is a real estate attorney? Sometimes they can be pretty costly. And so it's just very interesting to know, they go on to talk about a 3-bedroom home that stood since a generation after the Civil War came up. That has been blown down, and Black folks live there. And just living in rural Alabama is just really hard. And as an urban planner, I'm also thinking, was it designed to be that way? Because our cities and communities are strategically designed in ways that we don't even know about. Is a reason why this community and this neighborhood looks and feels this way, in the infrastructure that was created, and the zoning laws that are there, and the laws that tell you how high up you can build a building versus building somewhere else, that goes into what you can have on the building. So all of these things are strategically designed, and there are rules, and sometimes the rules are not always updated. And so in unpacking this, as I am talking to you guys, I'm wondering if it was probably designed in a way to keep Black folks from not being able to access the FEMA relief, right? I'm wondering if that was the case, and now it is just coming to light, because sometimes, us as Black folks, we just decide to just do without something. We're like, listen, I haven't had it, don't really even know how it feels to have it, so if it's not here anymore, then whatever, right? But now this is necessary. Housing is part of our personal economics. If you don't have a place to live, you are without a home. And so that definitely impacts your ability to survive. And so now if you take away someone's home, you take away their safe space, what do they have if they do not have the ability to rebuild? And most of us don't. So just wondering how this, at a very micro but impactful level, impacts our economics as a whole. Because I had no idea that this was happening. I just came across this article a few days ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is cray. And how come these things don't make it to news? Like, it's in the newspaper, but it isn't like on whatever the 5 o'clock, the 9 o'clock, the whatever news. Like, we usually have to seek these things out. And this is reminding me of a interview that I have recently done, where I said, we need to read more. We need to stop relying on folks just giving us this information, and we need to pick up a book and read and try to connect the dots, because everything that we need to know is written somewhere. And if it's not written there, it's written in a way that we know that it should have been written there. So it allows us to ask more thought-provoking questions, to really figure out what is happening and to really create change. Because I'm also now wondering, how come no politicians have ever brought this up? How come this isn't part of their platform? They don't care about Black folks being displaced in rural Alabama. Is that not on their radar, or do they just not care, or do they feel like FEMA is such a large entity, no one wants to go up against FEMA? Just trying to understand what is going on. And as you get further into the article, let me pull this up. And this goes back and ties into a discussion that we had last week around the idea of two sets of rules, right? Everyone is always saying, oh, you have to follow the rules. You have to follow the rules. And if you follow the rules, you will be able to, get past go and go to the next step. But we see here, then Baker got into a caveat. FEMA may accept a written statement as a last result, he reads. However, this is what they did in Puerto Rico. They were allowing people to self-certify ownership, but they weren't allowing them to do this in Alabama. So I wonder, why are there two sets of rules? And this is how the whole divide and conquer of culture gets into the nitty-gritty of things, because we all were captured from another place and brought into this place, right? If we weren't captured and brought into this place, we immigrated into this place because we were captured and brought to another place. So however you want to cut it, dice it, slice it. We can talk about that a little bit more. But then we get into the culture of pitting one culture against the other, right? Then you have people say, well, how come Puerto Ricans were able to do it and Black folks in Alabama weren't able to do it? And I just want to understand, how come there's just always seems to be two sets of rules at a minimum, and then underneath there's other sets of rules that one group has to follow one set of rules and another group has to follow another set of rules, and we don't even know what the freaking rules are, because we just think that it's whatever someone has told us are the rules, and they're always able to bend the rules when it is in their best interest, either economically or when it is in their best interest politically, right? And so we're always at the will of someone else allowing us to be self-sustainable in very vulnerable ways, and just trying to understand, how do we as a diaspora of Black people start to figure some of this stuff out and peel it back so we can start becoming more self-sustainable for ourselves, because we are just constantly, once we figure out one set of rules, it's like those rules just change. And this might sound very melancholy right now, but it is just very depressing. And it's depressing for me, and I don't even live in rural Alabama, and I have never visited, which is also another thing that is kind of depressing. But just understanding, like, if I were living here and this tornado happened and I had nothing to do with this tornado, and I thought that I was, I've been paying this tax bill, like, why can't they go back to property taxes? I mean, we have to pay property tax wherever we live, and we have the IRS up our butts, to be quite polite. And so how come you can pay the taxes, but then they say you don't have proof that you own something? It's almost like very defeating and very discouraging of trying to figure out how to incorporate in entities and sit at tables or work inside of systematic places that aren't to our best advantage. And that's why I am also going back to a previous article that we talked about with 2 Chainz, very excited to see that they're getting into solar energy. So just wanted to reset before, we're at 40 minutes. I kind of was going on a kind of like monologue here. But my name is Tasemere, your host of the Blackout live from New York. And the Blackout, let me just tell you what it is. The purpose is to celebrate Black folks across the diaspora and to have an open dialogue about Black economics, reimagine trends in business, and explore the magic that we have. Today, we talked about Cornel West and his resignation letter to Harvard University. We also explore Black entertainers investing in solar energy. That is 2 Chainz and Juicy J. And we were just talking about FEMA's denial of aid to generations of Black families living in the Deep South. Just wanted to also let you guys know that this was brought to you by Be More News. As you can see, I'm on Donnie Glover's platform today. He has given me the opportunity to bring my segment to you guys from here in New York City. We will be traveling sometimes outside of my humble home in the Bronx. Depending on where I am, I will go live from that actual location, which is why I'm trying to keep it very like, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. Last week, we were in Brooklyn, New York, where I was born and raised in East New York, Brooklyn, and NYCHA housing. And now I'm back in the Bronx, but I will be in Harlem sometimes, which I know most people are familiar with Harlem and everything that Harlem represents. So maybe we'll be able to explore some landmarks and some things that are happening there, which is almost like a city within a city, because Harlem has a whole nother culture, separate and apart from other things that are happening in New York City. And that is really where a lot of Black folks still meet to discuss all things that involve Black culture and how we want to move forward, whether we're talking about the Apollo Theater and entertainers and what's happening there, or we're just talking about local politics that are going on in the ground, and how does that impact and affect other branches of New York City. You know, our branches are referred to as boroughs if we're talking about New York City, but then if you're talking about New York State, you get into more like towns and counties kind of things, and that is where our rural folks are usually in upstate New York. So you usually have New York State, and then you have upstate New York, and then where we say like those are where the rural people are, and then you have downstate, which is considered the tri-state area with the 5 boroughs. But even within the 5 boroughs, you have different types of subcultures that are happening. So I am live from New York City right now. I'm in the Bronx, but I will be traveling in other places. So just giving a little caveat of what is going on and just giving a little recap. For folks that might just be joining in, here is the articles that we have reviewed. You can definitely feel free to, review them yourselves. I would give a little summary of what I have covered. Cornel West's a resignation letter from Harvard University, and he has said that it is basically has been intellectual and spiritual, capturing of his information and him not being able to will it, but also in this open letter that you can see here on Twitter. And I just clicked on it, and you're able to open it up, and I put it in a Word document so I was able to read it a little bit more clearly. He goes in and shares the actual letter that he submitted and shared some of his reasons why he is leaving the school. Now, he hasn't hinted at what is next. If he did, I haven't seen it yet. If you know about it, please jump in the chat and share, because we'd love to know where is he going next. There's so many new platforms where we are able to actually be a lot more independent and have a lot more ownership of our thoughts and our content and where we're going. So we'd love to know if he's planning on doing a podcast. That's the newest thing in town. If I'm sure he has written books, if he's planning on doing virtual Zoom sessions and sit downs, and just what is he planning on doing? How is he planning on doing it? Is he still in this fight? Because we need our elders. As a young person, I am just publicly saying that we need our elders to continue to fight, but to also teach us what we do not know. Because oftentimes, as a young person, we are like constantly reinventing the wheel, and it would be great if the baton is passed down more fluidly, right? So someone else that is now teaching at a university can avoid some of these pitfalls, because I don't know about anyone else, but on my LinkedIn page, I am seeing more and more young Black folks getting PhDs and that are looking forward to going into a more university, college setting and teaching, and just wanting to understand how do they protect their intellectual property as they are doing this. And then even for people that don't have PhDs, but we're working on jobs and we are contributing to the growth of this mission or this purpose of the entity that we're working for, and we want to be creative and we want to give our thoughts and our talents to that. But how do we also, own our space, and how do we protect ourselves from our thoughts being stolen and being put into like an overall caveat of this is what the company owns, because that really impacts our personal economics. Imagine if you come up with something and it doesn't make any money now, but years from now, maybe even a decade from now or 2 decades from now, your children, your grandchildren, your spouse can reap some of the benefits of your work because you actually own it and you were able to pass that down to whoever you want it to, right? How do we change the landscape of everything that we do? Is it now gobbled up and owned by this entity that we don't have any rights to? So I'm more interested in that. Definitely want to understand what his next steps are. How is that going to impact me as a young Black woman? How do I continue to be innovative and think, but also like just as a diaspora, so we don't have to keep starting over from scratch. Then we went into 2 Chainz, just sharing articles here again. 2 Chainz and Juicy J's investment in a $2 billion solar energy merger. Super excited for them, using their platforms to buy things other than jewelry and cars, and big mansions. And I'm also wondering how long are entertainers able to afford that when they're no longer grossing that amount of money, and what happens with that. But we also see here all the way at the bottom that our homegirl who has been fighting for voters' rights out in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, is also an advisor to the CEO, wanting to know how all of this is going to impact our economics as a whole. Really jumped into like some questions of other entertainers going to start doing similar things. What does this mean? Is this going to eventually trickle down into jobs for Black folks? How can we participate in our own layman entities of trying to, capture more wealth and grow in that kind of way? And then lastly, we reviewed an article that I am pulling up right now. That's going to take me some while to get to the top here, and it actually kicked me out. But the real damage, why FEMA is denying disaster aid to Black families who have lived for generations in the Deep South. We explored FEMA, what's going on. If you go all the way to the bottom, it felt like I don't even know where I found the little snippet. I'm looking for it now so I can highlight it for you, but it is somewhere towards the bottom. I felt it said, here it is. It was talking about how after this guy, Chris Baker, went through all of this investigative energy of figuring out why Black folks are not applying for FEMA relief and what's going on there, FEMA basically said, listen, we're not giving them this money because they cannot prove ownership. All the way at the bottom, let me pull this back up so you can clearly see it. It talked about how there were different rules for what happened out in Puerto Rico, and just wanting to understand, why does there always feel like there are multiple set of rules for accessing things that are said that we're supposed to be able to access, but not really? It's like a psycho Mike thought you had it, but no, just kidding, you really don't have it, right? So this is Tasemere, your host of the Blackout live from New York. Again, this was brought to you by Be More News founder Donnie Glover, which I'm sure you guys love as much as I do. The purpose of this segment is to celebrate Black folks across the diaspora and to have an open dialogue about Black economics, reimagine trends in business, and to explore the magic that we have. That is my wrap up for today's segment. If you guys definitely have any topics that you would like to explore on Saturdays at 10 a.m., feel free to leave it in the comments and I will work on getting that to you. Until next time, be well, stay cool. It's hot out there and I have no idea what we're going to be talking about next week, but I'm sure it's going to be good. Looking forward to connecting with you then. Talk to you soon. Ciao.